Now, last night, the Hawks beat the Knicks. It was Trey Young's return to MSG. The Hawks beat them, and then Trey Young rolled some dice on the court. Did I like that nobody checked him? And I would have liked OG Anunoby to go in there and push him to the ground, or maybe Josh Hart, maybe start a Malice in the Palace part 2, because, I think that's disrespectful. I know that Jalen Brunson said post game that if we don't want him to do that, we got to win the game. But last time I checked, when Kyrie Irving stomped on Lucky, what was the reaction? It was vitriol. It was, oh, no, we can't allow this guy to do this on our home floor. Rolling dice is disrespectful. And really, from this game, you can have multiple takeaways. But I want you guys to pick between one of these. Do you think this game proved that the Hawks are just this good of a team? We really have to start acknowledging them as one of the 6 best teams in the East, or are the Knicks fraudulent?
I will say, I'll respond to what you said initially, talking about, I want my Knicks to retaliate. I'm with Jalen Brunson. Go ahead and beat them. Then we don't have to worry about that. Look at Damian Lillard, who has that last laugh when he said to Tyrese Halliburton, you can have your moment, but understand, at the end of the day, when you're feeling very high and mighty, you can do what you want to do, but when you're at your lowest, you better be ready to face the repercussions of that. The Knicks are a better team than the Hawks.
Isaiah Hartenstein doesn't let that slide.
I don't know if that's true, actually. I
don't think he lets that slide.
Tough guys
Nate Robinson doesn't let that slide, man.
Melo would not let that slide.
Josh Hart wouldn't let that slide, but at the same time, he was on the court and he just lost the game, and he's respecting the truth.
Oh, he let it slide.
Let it slide.
The truth was that the Hawks played better than the Knicks yesterday. Do I think the Hawks are a good team? Well, when we get into the advanced numbers and stuff, they're basically a middle-of-the-pack team. They have one of the best defensive players in Dyson Daniels. That doesn't translate to their defensive rating. Of course, it's really a big man. That stat's really predicated by how great your bigs are and your front court is, because Dyson Daniels has been one of the 3 best defenders in the NBA this season, at least in my opinion. And I think that he was the main reason why the Hawks were able to go ahead and steal this win against the Knicks on the road to move on to the semifinal. But I'll go more. I don't want to answer either one, because one, I don't think the Hawks are this amazing team. I think that they're out here and they're playing some really strong basketball right now. And Dells, you mentioned it. They've played really strong basketball. At least you tweeted it at Joel Dells. Give him a follow. He tweeted saying that they play great basketball against great teams. They have a 6-1 record against, is it Cleveland? It's the Knicks. They have a couple of wins against your Celtics. They play really high-level basketball against really good teams. But their offense is still up and down, but we've been seeing it trend upward. Jalen Johnson's been playing some great basketball for them. DeAndre Hunter off the bench. Joel, I'll give you your flowers. You mentioned him a couple episodes back, and I love when you acknowledge it, because in his new role, he really has thrived. And DeAndre Hunter really hasn't been a question of skill. It's been more so health, and he's showing this year when he's healthy, he's good to go, and he's a really solid basketball player. And Trey Young hasn't been this amazing scorer this year. He's taken a backseat in that regard, but he's elevated as a playmaker, and he's starting to get all these other guys involved. We know that Trey Young's going to be great at the end of the day, but we're seeing a great, well-rounded team right now, or a very good, well-rounded team. And you have really strong shooting. You have some wing defenders that can go in and can kind of bail Trey Young out. And even in moments, we see Trey Young give effort. At minimum, that's what you can ask out of an undersized guard. He gives effort on the defensive side of the ball. I think yesterday, I don't want to say that we're highlighting the Knicks being frauds. I think it highlights more than anything, we need Mitchell Robinson back yesterday. There is no depth at the big position, even when Achua, regardless, I don't care if he's back. When Cat picked up that 5th foul, the game turned on its head, because you did not have anybody that can go and attack the glass. We saw Atlanta really take advantage of the O board down the stretch, giving them extra possessions, being able to kill more clock. To me, that and Dyson Daniels putting on an all-NBA defensive performance again on Jalen Brunson. Because when you can make Jalen Brunson, the creator of the offense, uncomfortable and force him into taking bad shots, that's a recipe to go ahead and beat the New York Knicks, regardless if Cat's playing a good game. But you have Dyson playing this well. You have him making Jalen Brunson as uncomfortable. You give flowers for a really good performance, but I don't think I'm calling the Knicks frauds just because they lost this game in a do-or-die situation. They don't have their backup big right now. When Mitchell Robinson comes back, whenever he does come back, obviously that's going to really alleviate some pressure off them. But we know their offense is going to be great. When it's not great, can you fall back on your defense? And we haven't been able to see that out of the New York Knicks. You're playing your starters a ton of minutes, but I really, really, really cannot stand the inconsistency out of Mikal Bridges. Last night, the game was lost because Jalen Brunson was struggling, and Mikal Bridges can't be your secondary creator. He really can't be, not at all, and he hasn't shown that on a consistent basis. So I wouldn't call the Knicks frauds because I'm not going to really highlight. I'm not worried about Jalen Brunson. He's going to be fine. I have my concerns with Mikal because of the inconsistencies. But so long as Mitchell Robinson can come back and be that backup big, I don't think they're frauds. My takeaway from this is, yeah, the Atlanta Hawks are a respectable team, but more so, Mitchell Robinson, get well soon.
I'm disappointed in the Knicks. This was a terrible loss. Like, this was the most backbreaking loss of the season. Trey Young silenced MSG. Like, the atmosphere at Madison Square Garden was up the roof. They really came to cheer on for the Knicks, and then the Knicks laid a shit on the middle of the floor. That's how bad of a product they put out there. The third quarter was terrible. I thought Mikal was on his way to having a good game. He started off the first quarter really well. I thought, okay, Mikal's been playing better as of recently. Last 5 games, he's averaging well over 20 points per game. My issue with the Knicks is that I feel like the physical toughness identity has kind of been lost from last year's team. The only way they win games is if they are shooting lights out. But their defense, we're really not able to have our defense carry us to victories and win these sluggish type of games. It's just too much inconsistencies. Against the Nuggets, we beat the brakes off of them. Then we lose to the Dallas Mavericks with no Luka Doncic. We lose to the Utah Jazz. We're in a dogfight with the Hornets with no Brandon Miller. And now we lose to the Atlanta Hawks. Like, I think the Atlanta Hawks are a really damn good team. Like, I really want to give them their flowers. Jalen Johnson should be an all-star this year. And his contract extension in the offseason was the biggest steal of the offseason because he's going to be an all-star level player. And the way that they've built this roster around Trey has really made him now go back to how he wants to really play the game, which is as a true point guard. He's distributing the best that he's ever distributed in his entire career. Eventually the shot's going to fall, so I'm not worried about that. But the Knicks, I just feel like the lack of identity, just a physical toughness from the team, I just don't feel like it's there. That enforcer that you have, I just don't think it's there. And Jalen Brunson being the team's best shot creator, he's an exceptional player, but bad shots, like forcing him into bad shots, is a little bit redundant because I think Brunson is a bad shot maker. And he's one of those guys that he's going to break you down and get into the mid-range. He's going to post you up even if you're a little bit bigger, and he's going to spin and then step back and hit just a ridiculous shot over you. But then when you have somebody that's 6'7", that's able to contest that better, it really makes it much tougher on him. This year, the Cat trade has aged well. I don't have an issue with that. I think the Mikal trade has a real chance of aging pretty poorly. But with that being said, I just feel like this Knicks team is just trending towards disappointment. Like, I want them to make the conference finals. I think that's the expectation that everybody had coming into this season. But would I be surprised if they lost in the second round? I wouldn't. There's just something about this team currently that they're missing from a toughness perspective that they just don't have. And maybe Mitchell Robinson brings it. I do think obviously we need a center because Cat protecting a rim, that's not going to cut it. He's just not good enough. Like, you need another rim protector next to him to negate all the flaws that he has on defense.
Can I say this, and then one of you guys can go? It was funny watching the very end of the game and seeing them get all the lobs. Atlanta leads the team in lobs, but it was funny seeing Cat being forced to kind of step out because they're attacking the basket. He steps out, they throw the lob. He's looking behind him. He's like, yo, where's Rudy Gobert? But the truth of the matter is they just got to be smarter in those rotations. If Cat's going to step up, you see OG Anunoby playing backside. Stay with the guy that's on that backside that's cutting to the basket. I saw too many lapses at the very end of the game, and I feel like the easy thing would be to go ahead and point at Cat because, of course, he hasn't been great defensively this season. But last night when I'm watching, Cat does have his 5th foul. He's trying to play it smart, but in him trying to close out, they were just killing them backside every single time.
Listen, this is kind of what you traded for when you got Cat. I mean, you get a boost in offense and unfortunately a drop in defense. He cannot be a defensive anchor. That's just what life is. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not his role. It's why him with Rudy Gobert worked and he wasn't as bad defensively because Rudy was the anchor. You know, Rudy can cover up so much. And Cat is not a bad one-on-one post defender. So that it was perfect for him. Like he could just do that. So I think defense is the bigger problem. Joel, you have me fucking cracking up over here because I can't believe this Atlanta loss has you damn near ready to.
Who cares?
Like it's that's what really had me.
It's
crying.
Atlanta. They beat us in the playoffs.
Listen, I get it.
Yeah, first of all, Drew, you lost me. Shooting dice is a staple in the New York community since before we was born, since the 60s to 50s, head crack, all that. So for him to go to the middle of the court, shoot a dice, Macy said head crack, I won, was completely, first of all,
he's not a clown for that.
No, he was lit. Second of all, disrespectful. As a Knick, you got to take that to offense. Lock in. I agree. I don't think malice in the palace. That's a little too much to ask for, but definitely a little like, yo, walk up on him like, yo, what's that about? Like, yo, bro, we don't like that. You know, some of that malice in the palace is nuts, but definitely something in the middle ground.
These current players just don't feel the rivalry. Nobody was there.
Friends. They're all really good friends. They hang out after the games and they go party with each other and they, you know, all that stuff. But
it could be different now. It could be different now because that was rude.
Like if you get a young team like Houston, I feel like they hate everybody. So they're a young team that they go into war with everybody. Atlanta's on a good streak right now. I think it's too early to say they're a great team. I think they're streaking at the right time. You know, you got DeAndre Hunter playing really well. You got Dyson Daniels, who's been an All-NBA defender. Dyson Daniels really is the perfect example of how being a guard defender really can't save a team defense. Like you really need a big man who's a legitimate rim protector because it just covers up so much. But Dyson Daniels has been amazing on that end. You got Jalen Johnson, who's the clear number 2 guy. He's been an all-star this year. I agree with you, Joel. He should be in the all-star game. Just his ability to get in transition, to be a play finisher, to be the point forward, to just be able to see advanced reads, create advanced reads, get on the glass, be versatile. He's really good in what he can do at 6'9", be able to dribble the ball, handle the ball, create for others, create for himself. I think Atlanta with Trey Young, his improvement in something we didn't even think he could improve on, and that's his playmaking, which he's been absolutely ridiculous at. I do think the scoring, it's tough because he's just a small guy. You know, he doesn't have insane athleticism, so he's not going to bully you in the paint. You know, he doesn't have this insane speed where he can just blitz past you. He's really short. So, you know, it's hard to go up against the trees and finish. So he relies a lot on those floaters and those deep threes. You know, his jumper is kind of a little weird. So he kind of has to shoot those deep threes to get it off, or it could be a block. So Trey Young is I feel like that's just who he is. I don't want to say an inefficient player, but kind of feels like he is an inefficient player. He hasn't been the most efficient in his career. You know, it's just because of his size and stuff like that.
He's going to get back on track.
Yeah, I back on track is like league average efficiency, maybe below that. I think he can do that. You know, I think he'll be fine in the grand scheme of things. I think this Atlanta team is solid, though. I think top 6 is what you asked.
Are they better?
They would have to replace the Heat.
The Heat have been playing better the last.
They're the same tier. They're like the same tier to me. I don't have a favor towards either one of those. You know, I think they're right there, probably with them.
Hawks or the Heat, you're saying?
Yeah, I think they're like I'll probably maybe lean the Heat. You know, I don't know. That one's a toss-up, but I don't think the Knicks are fraud. I think their defense was always going to be a concern. I think Cat as a rim protector is not going to cut it in no world. I think in the playoffs, that's going to be an issue. I do like the idea of maybe starting Cat and Mitch at the same time, you know, try to figure out, see what you can do with there. But then you really don't have a backup big. But in the grand scheme of things, Thibodeau plays 7 guys. So I feel like you guys have your 7 guys when Mitch comes back. It's Deuce, it's Mitch, it's Cat, Hart, Bridges, OG, Brunson. So really, you just have to make it to the playoffs, and then you can rock out.
Yeah, I don't think Knicks probably can't be frauds because the East is so bad. Again, I don't completely disagree, Joel, because second round matchups, say they had to play like a Cleveland, for example, that could go either way. The Knicks could end up losing, but they're still going to finish as like a top 3 team, probably at worst in the Eastern Conference. The Hawks are pretty funny when you look at their schedule. They started off 2-0, then they lost like 7 of 9. They lost back-to-back games against Washington. They lost to Detroit. They lost to Portland and all of these teams. And then, as I tweeted out last night, they're 6-1 against the Celtics, the Bucks, the Knicks, and like all of the top teams. The Cleveland Cavaliers. They had an overtime win against the Lakers a few nights ago too. So against better opponents, they end up playing pretty well. But it's those like kind of bottom of the barrel teams. Maybe outside Detroit, it's been kind of decent this year. They really have struggled against this year, right? If they were just like 500 against those teams, this could be like the 4 or 5 seed just because of how bad the Eastern Conference has been. But I think the Hawks kind of, I don't want to say rebranding because they're not like a defensive, like they're not the Magic defensively, right? Where like they're a top 5 defense by any means, but they're trying something different in terms of building around Trey Young, right? A few years ago when they went to the Eastern Conference Finals, best offense in basketball, Trey Young centric. They obviously like had holes in their team, but due to a couple, positive or, lucky circumstance for them, they were able to advance super far. But now having all of these wings around him, having all of these wings that can defend, it's a bit of a different look for the Atlanta Hawks. The ceiling is still completely capped, right? Like Trey Young's a good player. He's probably not a number 1. Jalen Johnson's a really good player. I don't want to say he can never be a number 2, but as we stand right now, the way the team's constructed, they're not going to go out and like win a playoff series by any means, but they're going to be a fun regular season team. I think they could easily finish as like the 6th seed in the Eastern Conference. But I do think the bigger story is about New York. And I know, Rev, you're like laughing at Joel, but I feel that. I feel like a national televised game, the NBA Cup, the New York Knicks are expected to go on a deep playoff run this season. The expectations are as high as they've ever been in New York, probably in our lifetimes. And in one of the bigger games of the first 2 months of the season, you come up short, right? And that was a game at the end of regulation. They had a chance to win that game. And Drew mentioned it when Cat got that 5th foul. If I remember correctly, the 5th foul was kind of silly. I know Cat has a tendency of having some bad fouls. If I remember correctly, it was a bad foul. He goes to the bench. You really don't have a backup big you can trust. And then down the stretch, Atlanta was able to hit some shots, especially like the lobs you mentioned, Drew, to really put that game away and some offensive rebounds. So I understand where the frustration comes from because you want to see New York step up in these biggest games because last season in Game 7 against Indy, I know a lot of guys got hurt. You fell off short. Of course, the year prior, you fell off short. So these last couple of seasons, although the expectation might not have been as high as this season, you still felt like you were missing just a little bit something. And adding Karl-Anthony Towns, adding Mikal Bridges, felt like if there's any year the Knicks are really going to go on a run at this thing, it's going to be this year. It's going to be next year. So when the biggest test of the season comes up, outside of like Boston, maybe on opening night, to come up short against Atlanta, and it's Trey Young who has done this for, the last 3-4 seasons, and it's in the media and everyone knows about it. As a fan, I understand the frustration, but New York is still a really good team and they're going to be a top 3 seed. So I'm not overly concerned about them, but the concerns that I had, day one with their rim protection, with Karl-Anthony Towns being your 5, it's still there. And Mitchell Robinson will come back and will clean some things up. But again, it's going to be really difficult for me to expect Mitchell Robinson. I hope he stays healthy, but it's hard to just assume he comes back in January. From January to the end of May, he's just going to be straight and he's going to be healthy and he's going to be able to consistently contribute to this team. If he does, the Knicks we could have a different discussion about. But for that to be like the missing piece that fixes everything and they go from a middle of the pack defense to like a top 7 defense, I still have my questions about that.
I just feel like the Knicks, it hasn't been that often, but whenever they've been favored, it often feels like they're the stepping stone and they're not the team that ends up taking a step. Like with the Carmelo Knicks, Paul George breaks out against us, and then Roy Hibbert gets that block on Melo, and they advance when the Knicks were favored. And now we're talking about Indiana as that top team. I believe the Knicks were favored against the Hawks when we made the playoffs in 2021. They ended up losing. When we were underdogs, we ended up beating the Cavs. I feel like when the Knicks end up being the favorites, they usually end up being let down. Like that's how it's kind of been in last year in the playoffs against the Pacers. I know that we dealt with some injuries. That was winnable. In game 7, the Pacers just came and they took over MSG. The Knicks have lost to the Pistons. They've lost to the Jazz. So this year they've already shown that they're going to lose to some bad teams. They're 4-7 against 500 teams or better. Even against the teams that you want the Knicks to play really well against, they're under 500. And I feel like these are the moments that they got to get up for. Like these matter. And that's just kind of that's not the feeling I've got from them. I just feel like it's way too inconsistent. Offensively, it's way too one-dimensional. And if we're not shooting really well, then most of the time we're just having an off night.